Thank you for joining us. My name is Bradley Butler, and I am the Executive Director and Curator at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, New York. This virtual artist talk, which we'll be doing today, is held in conjunction with our current exhibition. That show is called Inspired by Nature. And so this exhibition, through drawing, painting, and sculpture, the artists included in the exhibition depict their own personal connections to the natural world using abstraction and symbolism. This collective body of work speaks to a human desire to understanding the world around us. And the artists included in this show are Sheila Barcik, Allie Herman, Erika Medina, Santy, Nancy Topolski, Hanna Washburn, and Julia J. Wolfe. So I just had a few images of the exhibition up right now, and then we're gonna go in and see a few pieces by each of the artists. Also, if you have not had a chance to see the show for yourself, we hope that you'll be able to. This exhibition runs through Wednesday, September 13th, and we are open Tuesday and Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Also, if you're not able to join us because you just don't live around here, I also did a virtual walkthrough of the show, which you can find on our YouTube channel and also here on Facebook. So you can definitely check that out to see. So I will bring back some faces here. And so I just wanted to go through and have each of the artists introduce themselves. Allie, if you wanted to go first, that would be great.
I'm Allie Herman. I live in Troy, New York currently. I've been here 2 complete years and currently living out one of my wishes in life to live on the Hudson River somewhere, which I can see right outside my window, which is great. So that is a big inspiration to have that right here. But as a child, I was always inspired by my environment and my surroundings. I spent a lot of time growing up in rural areas in Massachusetts and always was outside playing with mud, dirt, plants, doing plant projects. So I've kind of embraced the organic shape within my work. And yeah, I feel that's a good introduction.
Great. Well, thank you. And fun fact, Allie Herman was an artist in residence here at Main Street Arts back when we had our artist residency program running. And I think that was in 2018.
2017.
17. Whoa. Okay.
2017. I did a very different body of work. It was a woman icon project that was portraits of famous portraits done in encaustic.
Yeah, and that was the first time we had the local fire people.
Yeah, towards the end of the day, it was one of those days where we were talking with a lot of people coming through, and I thought, I'll just turn this off. I'll turn the hot plate off. And instead of turning it off, I turned it all the way up. And I'm sorry that the fire department had to come. There was probably some insurance claim you had to file.
Oh, no, it was fine. It was just a fun memory to have.
Yeah.
So. Thank you, Allie. And we'll hear more from Allie just in a bit here. Let's see, Erika, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sorry about that. Let me get unmuted. Hello, everyone. My name is Erika Medina, and I live in Danby, New York. We've been in this basic area for about 15 years, living rurally, living off-grid a good bit of the time. I have a small studio that basically sits in the woods, so that's a very inspirational place for me to work. Yeah, I studied painting and had, still do a lot of work with oils and paint, but I also am very drawn to elemental materials. I really like working with wood, with metal, with stone, and incorporate that in a lot of some of my mixed media pieces. I work a lot from the figure, but the figure as it sort of ties into the natural world as well, or with animals, and the figure as sort of a symbolic form as well. Yeah, basically this was the perfect exhibit because I feel like this inspired by nature can sort of cover a lot of the work that I do. That's definitely something that has been a thread through my work over the years, is how we tie into the natural world as people, both the natural world in a physical sense and in a spiritual sense too. So it was a wonderful exhibit to have my work accepted into. Thought it was right up my alley. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. And this was your first time showing at Main Street Arts. So it's great to have shows like this that, we get to find out about people who we weren't aware of, but maybe we should have been, so this is really, really great. So thank you. Let's see, next, Penny, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I live in Syracuse, New York, and I have a painting degree from Syracuse University many years ago. And, I've always been inspired by the abstract, especially the post-war abstract expressionists. And the first time that I really knew that art was going to be my thing was I saw in the Philadelphia Museum, I saw an Anselm Kiefer, great, big, gigantic, thick. It was ugly because it was about war, and it was black and full of straw and stuff, but it was just so moving. And I just saw the power of what art can do, and especially painting, because I'm a painting major, and I just think that painting, I explore a lot with it because it has great power over people viewing it. So my work is pretty exploratory within just painting it. I don't throw a lot of other stuff in it, but I do explore with sizes and shapes and the marks that I'm making and sizes, and I already said sizes, just layers and scraping and all that stuff. So excuse me. But I've always been, I have a lot of figurative work, but it's abstracted and always kind of with natural shapes and within the context of nature.
Great. Well, thank you, Penny. And I'll definitely echo that Anselm Kiefer, that just kind of awe-inspiring thing. We saw, my wife Sarah and I saw a show, and I think it was in 2010 at the Gagosian Gallery in New York City, and it was a solo show, and it was just like, all of this work was just so amazing, and yeah, very, very impactful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Nancy, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Nancy. I live in Rochester. We've lived here 30 years now, but I was raised in the rural outside Philadelphia, horse country kind of area. I really believe I was very much influenced really early on by my grandparents. And my parents also gave me lots of freedom to make anything I want. And I consider myself more a maker than an artist, because I really do like to experiment and make things in all kinds of ways. But I had a grandfather who was a silversmith. My grandmother taught me needlepoint and other embroidery techniques, and my other grandmother painted in oil. And I also grew up in the woods, just playing and making stick forts and bringing wildflowers home to mom. And since I went to college, I fell in love with making art. I always thought it was funny because nobody ever said, oh, you might want to pursue art as a career. That was not like kind of brought up. I was going to be a French teacher, but then I found out you can take art in college, and I did, and I fell in love with it and really kind of never looked back. So I've been teaching and making art pretty much my whole life. And I love all different mediums. The materials are probably what really influenced me the most. they kind of drive the force, if it's the wool with the needle felting, or working in metal, or working in paint and collage. I love working with images. I love working with found objects. I really just try different things all the time and kind of see what works and what doesn't, and try again. Yeah, and with the inspiration of nature, I definitely have always had a real interest in the metaphor of birds for humans' lives. I love the idea that birds nest, that they fly off, they migrate, but they often return home. The sort of push and pull of nesting and escaping has always been a theme in a lot of my work. And birds in general, their form is just so wonderful. The shapes and the different, fullness of a bird is really beautiful to me. So I've used that form quite a lot in sculpture and image making. And then I also just love like the repetitive patterns and textures of scales and coral, roots and stems, things that branch off and change, and things that are completely perfectly repeating themselves in a way that just seems impossible. I can't make it happen with my hands, but that nature made it happen is just really fascinating to me.
Great. All right, great. Well, thanks, Nancy. And we'll hear more from Nancy in a little bit, even more on the connections to nature. Hanna, just to tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Hanna Washburn. I am based in Beacon, New York, so a few hours south. I'm grateful for these virtual programs and for the walkthrough as well, which was really great to see. Helps folks that don't live quite as close to experience the exhibition. So I also live right on the Hudson River, but I studied in New York City. I moved up here in 2019. And I work largely with repurposed textiles. And I build kind of compound sculptural forms using textiles from my own life or the lives of people close to me. So a lot of worn clothing, either that I wore or that somebody in my life wore, or things like bed sheets, curtains, textiles from the home. I'm really interested in the kind of memory that's embedded in a material like a textile that you live with, that you wear on your body, or that you have in your living space, and then kind of putting things together in new ways, new combinations, and giving them kind of a new life. And the sculptures that I make kind of result in these anthropomorphic forms. And I'm interested in the idea of kind of giving life to a form and giving it a personality, and the way that shapes and figures and even the language of how we discuss these things is mirrored in the body and in nature and creatures, and kind of trying to break down boundaries between these things and show the way that they are reflected in each other and connected. Yeah, and I do also use some ceramics in my work, and some of the pieces in this exhibition have some ceramic elements. And that's a relatively new part of my practice, and it's something that has been really exciting to introduce. I've been thinking about, the interplay of hard and soft, and ceramic as kind of like a backbone that functions to kind of hold forms up, whereas the rest of my work is often softer and kind of floppier. Yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
Great. Well, thank you. And there was a great video on Instagram. So if you find Hanna on Instagram, you can see a great video of a little kind of studio tour and interview. And your studio's in a garage, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Testudo Art made a studio visit video that they posted recently on Instagram. And yeah, my studio is in our like detached 1-car garage, which is kind of perfect because it's like a separate space. And like a space unto itself, but it's very close. So yeah,
feel garagey at all either. It was like you open up the door and it's like a real artist studio in there. It's not like an artist studio in a garage. So really cool.
That's a compliment of the highest order. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's see, we have Julia next. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Julia J. Wolfe. I'm currently based in Rochester. Been here for a year now, so not too long, but really enjoying the city. Real quick, I want to apologize for my dogs barking in the background and probably cats doing their thing too. Nature at its finest. Yeah, so my work has always been pretty heavily inspired by nature, by the landscape wherever I find myself in. I've lived in several different regions of the country for my life. Most recently, I was coming from Iowa, and before that, I was in the Boston area, which is where I grew up. And I've noticed that my work kind of changes depending on where I am. So all the pieces that are in this show, I made in Iowa from 2015 to 2021 or 22, something like that. And my work it combines representational and abstraction, as well as nature and objects of mass production, sort of reflecting on the human reality, condition, whatever you want to call it. And I kind of try to find a balance between sort of things that seem to oppose each other. So there's a little bit of commentary on, more serious issues that we find ourselves facing every day, or and then sort of balanced with a whimsicalness and jokes of sorts. Sorry, are very loud right outside the door. Distracting, so I do apologize. But I think a big part of my process is to be playful with everything that sort of goes through my head and is going on around me and around people that I interact with, and trying to get a sense of both delight and critique. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And, dogs, we can't control them. They can't control themselves. It's just a part of it. So it's what it's like living with one. Well, great. Well, thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. And as you did that, some of you talked a little bit about your connections to nature or some things involving your work. And I think what I want to have each of you focus on now, as we bring up images of your work, is really getting into that connection with nature through the art making process. And I think that keeping the theme of this show, which is very broad and almost a non-theme, really, because what's not from nature, that's around you on a given day. I mean, even like a building is made from things that are derived from nature. So, but I think as a curator, I'm really interested to see the possibilities that are present from all the submissions that are given into this very general idea for a theme of a show. So I really love that, nature, it can be personal, it can be public, it can be spiritual, political, it can be about, the actual specific plant or animal, or it can be about water, air, fire. I mean, it could be so many different things. And it brings all of that into one place for this exhibition. And you each have your own individual voices and individual ways of making work. And those get to come together and interact. And then those things that maybe seem very different come together, and then a relationship is formed. So, that's what I really appreciate about this show, and about each of your work. So, so I just want to share some images as we go on here. And let's see. I've got things blocking my screen, so I can't see the share button. There we go. Okay. So first, I'm just going to share a couple pieces of Sheila's. So Sheila couldn't make it today for the talk. So I just have a couple of my favorites of things I hoped that she would have picked if she was going to talk about them. So we've got two paintings. They're both untitled. But I'm just going to read you her short statement here as we have the work up. So she says, my work is about our existential and spiritual experiences in life. The themes in my work are energy, light, and the magic and power of nature. My intention is to create timeless, organic, often otherworldly landscape-like scenes. This imagery portrays the universal connection between humanity, nature, and the cosmos. And the two that I chose really, show the range of the paintings included in the show. One, you can tell it's definitely a landscape. The other one gets a little bit more abstract, even though they both kind of have abstraction to them. So I just wanted to share those so that people could see Sheila's work as well. So I think, let's see here. Next we have Allie. I've got a couple pieces. We'll see them one at a time, but Allie, you're up. Well, you're muted here.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, we're good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So this piece is called the Poetry Trail 2, and it was inspired by my time at the Malay Colony, now known as Malay Arts. I had a residency there in 2020, actually during the pandemic. So we were the first cohort to go back after they had reopened from COVID. So that was in July of 2020. And for those of you that don't know what the Malay Colony is, it's the home and property of Edna St. Vincent Millay, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. And the grounds there are immense. It's a protected area. I stayed in a Sears Roebuck barn. It was a build-it-yourself barn kit that her and her sister had gotten and husband had gotten and built. And when she passed away, her sister turned it into a residency program. So you lived downstairs in the barn, and then they had studios upstairs that you worked in. But on the grounds, there was a place called the Poetry Trail. And it was this vast, almost brown trail because it was all pine trees, oak trees, but lined with this super soft moss. And you could take your shoes off and it was like walking on this beautiful spongy carpeted floor. Ironically, when you got to the end of the Poetry Trail, her gravesite was there, as is her sister and other people in her family. And when I say grave plot, it's literally like a rock in the ground with a fence around it. But walking along the trail, I had that experience with these luscious greens, which I imbued in this work. And it was just such a magical experience. So I hope that piece kind of captures that. And then there was two others that followed with it as well too, because every time I walked through it, I encountered something different. In this piece in particular, you have the kind of orb-like shapes, which those were inspired by different mushrooms that I saw when I walked along it. And it is reminiscent of other orb shapes that I use within my work. Typically, for many years, I had used the money plant seed pod, so still kind of emulating that shape. But this one is obviously the underside of the mushroom cap so that you can see the gills on the undersides. But it also evokes other organic shapes like sea urchins as well too. So it kind of has that mystical sense of being on the land, but could potentially be an underwater scene as well too. If you want to move to the next image, this was one of my favorite pieces that I had created during that time as well. I am not known for somebody who wants to pick up brown and use it in particular, but through various crits, I've been told that brown is a strength of mine. And ironically, when I did this piece, I had some brown ink that was sort of dried up. I had the actual orbs in this piece. They were done on coffee filters, and I had burned the edges and I accidentally dropped them in encaustic wax. And I thought, this is perfect. It's going to bring together my love of drawing, all the different media that I use, acrylic, encaustic, ink, pencil. And I just kind of went for it on this, but the start was that kind of like washy background of brown because I was straining to get something out on paper, and then just continued to work in layers, kind of scraping acrylic over acrylic and scratching and drawing back onto it. So evoking a sense of decay, maybe more so than growth. That's a really big concept within my work of exploring the differences between growth and decay and how that cycle kind of goes through and emulates itself. So I feel like that light brown swash kind of when it comes, if you're going counterclockwise, it kind of comes back up and is emulating that circular form of growth and decay.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And yeah, the image is just a little bit more blown out, so you're losing some of the nuance.
Yeah, there's some nuances lost in the upper
Yeah,
left
it's
area.
very rich, and I think you could probably see it in that walkthrough I did too, if people aren't going to be able to see the show. So, well, great. Well, thanks so much for sharing more about your work. And let's see, up next we have Erika.
All right, I'm off mute. Yeah, this piece is called Connected. And a lot of my work is done on this. This is an oil on wood. And this sort of figure shape is a repeating shape that's found in my work a lot, where the body, it's an obvious figurative shape, but it becomes almost more symbolic. And I like to work with this shape a lot, to just sort of have a figurative shape that is sort of allowing us to sort of relate to this piece as another individual, so that you're facing this and you're sort of starting this dialogue with the piece. And I find that in my own work, that starts to develop as well, that I'm not necessarily thinking about where I'm going, and I'm not like pre-drawing sketches. It's a very intuitive way that I work, and the figures definitely do start this sort of dialogue with myself that I also hope continues with whoever is viewing the work. This piece was done late winter, very late winter, and looking at a lot of the trees outside my studio. And I find working, both being in nature and working on my art, becomes very meditative. It's a very similar feeling that I get, and especially once there's a lot of push and pull in my work that, I may be in my head when I first come in the studio, but once it really starts working, it just becomes more intuitive and the brain sort of just shuts down. And so this was just sort of being inspired by these trees outside, these trees that are sleeping, these trees that are waking up, and that whole sense of our connectedness to the natural world in general. There's I use a lot of symbology in my work, that's sort of my own symbolic language that to me feels universal, in a sense that I feel like I'm hoping that some things sort of we pick up on it without sort of having to consciously think. But some of it is this sort of line that goes into an internal place. A lot of that is either red or blue in a lot of my work. It's tying into, in this piece in general, in particular, sense of the lifeblood, like the blood that's running through us, the same blood that goes through us is going through the trees, that it's going into their roots. And be that water or be it our blood, it's a very similar thing. So it's a give and take. In this figure, it's kind of the tree giving that energy to the figure giving that back to the earth. So it's that sort of, that sense of it running through both the figures. This shape that is found, I work a lot in my figures, this shape that's found sort of on the chest, sort of over the heart, is that same sense of sort of a internal external, which I think my work plays with a lot. There's a physicality of like what I'm showing. It may be very like physically recognizable, but it's also, I'm trying to draw people more into an intuitive sort of spiritual internal place. I feel like the more you sort of either you can lose yourself completely in the outdoors and into nature, and you can kind of go to that same place by going deeply internal. So I'm sort of playing with a lot of that we're both physical and spiritual beings in my work. And this sort of balancing, this is another sort of symbol that I use a lot, that be it sort of symbolic staff or on the head, or also that sense of balance. And that's another sort of theme that comes into my work a lot, is finding a sense of balance, both in our individual lives, in how we walk on the earth, how we tie into our relationships, everything, that finding balance. And also these, I really like to work with these figures. I like when they're surrounding me in my studio, or, you know, that they're also these unseen forces. So not only is this sort of represents maybe our own experiences as an individual and our relationship with the natural world, but also that these unseen forces are around us, these guardian pieces, these, you know, I don't know how to describe them more than I feel that there's sort of energetically these entities are around us within the natural world. And so that comes forth in a lot of my work as well. But yeah, I really enjoy working on these pieces too, because they break the boundaries of sort of a squared off canvas. And I really like that, because it's almost like it's painting on a body then, in that sense. So I really enjoy working on these pieces on wood as some of my expression. I have sort of a wide range of how I like to work, but yeah. And this piece, this is a oil on paper. This one is called The Mystery of Water. And again, sort of this symbolic figure. I feel like a lot of my work, again, the figure is sort of, even when I try to pull away and maybe the figure isn't present in the work, I always seems to come back, because I feel like it really is representing how we as people are interacting with the natural world, and also tying it in the sense that we can't separate ourselves. And I feel like, you know, even seeing ourselves as the sort of, I hear a lot of people say this sort of cancer on the earth, like we are not that separate, and we are not that great that we can sort of pull ourselves away and say we are separate. And a lot of my work deals with that sense that it's a remembering that we need to come to. And this one is on the mystery of water. So that whole sacredness and mystery of water, that great sort of terrifying depths, that gentle rain, that water within our own bodies, water that is used to sort of cleanse us physically, water to, water can hold a spiritual energy and cleanses us spiritually, water that nurtures the very food that we eat. Also some other symbols in this one as well. This is sort of, this one actually was an image that there's a local cidery near my house here, South Hill Cider. And the owner of that cidery really liked this piece and used it on one of their ciders. And it's definitely, there's some of the imagery that's in there is of the sort of those trees that are planted. It's like an orchard, or this growing, like, again, how water feeds us. So that's some of the symbology within the figure itself. And that again is sort of this elemental sort of figure energy that, again, I tend to find myself putting it back onto a human figure, even though it's carrying more elemental energies and maybe not specifically a person in that sense. But again, that sort of balancing that tie between seeing ourselves as more, as elemental and as much a part of the earth as any other natural things are a part of the earth. It's I feel like touches on a lot of, what I'm working with. I feel like a lot of, again, like the symbols, the patterns in nature, elemental energies, materials definitely feature in my work. And again, the figure there, hoping that it somehow either puts us in the painting to relate to what is being presented, and see ourselves within that natural world. But I feel like that sums it up for the most part.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, I think it's really easy to feel that we are so separate from nature. Like just even talking about it, like nature is this whole other thing, even though we are part of it. It's interesting but not surprising because the way that we live our lives, it's seemingly more and more stepping away from nature, at least for a lot of us. So I think it's a good reminder that we are kind of one with nature.
Yeah, there's just one, if I can share just one quote that I feel like is just really sums it up so beautifully by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's just so obviously so articulate and poetic in her writing, but she says, knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street to a sacred bond. And I just feel like that's really resonates with me, that sense of, it's not just, yeah, it is, it's a bond, and it's this nurturing relationship. And yeah, that's what I try to capture in my work.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see where we're at here. We've got Penny. We've got a couple of pieces by Penny here.
So this one, well, I started doing this series of pieces, kind of thinking about, the environmental issues that we're seeing a lot of repercussions of right now. And, but I, in the past, I had done this series of a lot of butterfly paintings. They're very abstracted. Sometimes you can't tell that they're butterflies, but it's got that movement feel. And so then that got me thinking about this year, the milkweed pods that they are born on. And so I kind of used the symbolism of the milkweed pod. I thought it was such a wonderful allegory of the seed floating off into the wind, and it lands and starts new life wherever it lands. And so, but I took it from there, and each piece I let myself just explore, explore and play with the painting. And I chose all of them are these tall, narrow format. And I chose that for one, it's just to challenge myself in my approach to composition, because it's just a very different format, and it kind of was challenging to deal with it, but I liked having that consistency throughout them all, that they were all that. And then so they all have human bare feet in them. I call them like walking this earth, because I was thinking I often put figurative elements in with nature or abstract pieces, and I was thinking about how nature or people have walked the same earth for thousands of how many years we've been here, and over we are confronted with the same issues, and the same problems, and the same joys, and the same just questions. And so it just kind of added that other element. And then being the tall shape, like your pieces, Erika, you were saying that had the you kind of liked the figures all around you. I ended up hanging these all in my studio wall next to each other, and they almost felt like, even though they're rectangles, they kind of felt like beings, just the tall nature of them. And yeah, so this one was actually the first one that I did. So you can see more of the milkweed pod represented here. And then I kind of let myself, in some of them, they stray from that, like with the red one called Ashes, which I was thinking of, you know, the fires. And fire also is, you know, it's a actually rebirth happening that happens, you know. It actually, sometimes nature needs a burn to kind of clean out all the roughage, and then nature grows again. And but so this one has that kind of messy, naturey, tangled feel to it, and which was challenging to work with. I actually started this one and went on to about 2 or 3 others, and then went back to continue working on it because it was never done. I didn't really know how to finish it up. And then going back to, if you go back to that red one, the Ashes, I started playing with these horizontal stripes because the vertical format also gives this, it sends the energy upward, and I liked that whole thought. But then I was playing with these horizontal stripes, which horizontal kind of ends up giving more of a peaceful feeling. So there's like this play between the energy and the calm in them, which I kind of liked experimenting with. Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's great. And I think it's interesting that, you know, you and Erika feel similar about, you know, the way you connect to this work visually. And then when we were both at the opening talking about the 2 pieces that are on the wall next to each other and how well they complement one.
Yes.
And it was just such an interesting thing. So I think there's a even deeper connection there than just what it looks like on the wall together, which is really cool. So great.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I loved your pairings in the show. The way that all of our work played off of each other was really fun. I think all of the work here adds a nice element of play and exploration. And your pairings really made you kind of think back and forth between the pieces and what they might be saying to each other, and it was fun.
Thanks. No, it's great to find those connections for sure. Well, thank you so much, Penny. And I believe we've got Nancy up next. Gets muted there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, this one's called Urchin. And this was a real labor of love. This just seemed to never end. These little points I would make. I'm sure it took me well over a year to complete this piece. But I was determined. I do remember that part of it. I'm trying to remember other parts of making it. I remember just really wanting to do something, sea-like, that had this repetitive protective spikes. Actually, I think this might have been like towards the end of COVID. I couldn't work over COVID. I don't know about you all, but I have all this time on my hands and I can't do anything. But by the end, I started to really kind of get back into it. And it was definitely about being protected, finding a safe space, being isolated, and working in these repetitive forms is a function that works for me. I mean, I work full time. I have a family. I have an elderly mother. I have responsibilities. So I don't have full days in the studio like I'd like. I love to work like intuitively just all day and get lost in making work, but it just doesn't happen as often as I'd like. And so being able to kind of concentrate on one form and make 700 of them is fits my schedule very well. And also, keeps my hands busy. A lot of making art for me is keeping my hands busy. It's so hard to sit still through this whole thing. I should have had something in my hands, but I do remember now, this was kind of the end of COVID, and it kind of, came together. It took a long time to complete. And every time I thought, okay, it's looking good, I'm like, nope, need a couple more spikes on that side. Need to balance it over there. I want them longer towards the top. And so I added to it here and there and cut away at other ones. That's a really great thing about the needle felting and the wool for sculpture, is it's so pliable and it's so easy to work with. You can cut it, you can add, you can subtract, you can bend it, you can manipulate it in so many ways. And it's so textural and wonderful to have in the hands that it's definitely an enjoyable process. It's just a long, laborious process. But yeah, this was really a special piece for me. I feel, because it just kept adding to it and adding to it. And it was just this very physical need to put as many spikes on there and get it as completely cozy and safe in that little kind of space inside, the urchin, just like a sea urchin. They eat the insides like that are in there. It looks kind of a similar shape. The dolls have kind of evolved using doll faces and hands and feet for different things. I really like having something that is not soft in juxtaposition to the wool. And so a lot of times it's playing with all kinds of different objects that are in my life. And I have a lot of objects in my life. I work with found objects and I love all kinds of materials. So I have a very full home of all kinds of options and things to try. And if I don't have them, I seek them out. But I'm sure I tried many different things within that space, and the doll made the most sense. And then these came about a little faster because I only had the one actually when I applied for the show. And I put in parentheses, there'll be multiples of these if you pick it. And Brad did pick it. So when we find out in late May, by July, I had to make 6 of them. There's 7 total. I made 6 of them since May. And the first one was definitely kind of playing around with the same idea, like different forms, the human face with the bird feet. And I've always loved all kinds of parts of birds. I even love to keep dead birds and part of the, if I find a wing on the ground or a dead bird, it ends up in the freezer. I just think they're so interesting with their physical form. And then, like I said before, all the metaphors that I feel really make sense for my life. But it was so great because I otherwise wouldn't have made, 6 more if I hadn't had a deadline, and I don't often have a deadline. So making them gave me so much like opportunity that I wouldn't have given myself otherwise. I would have, done a little bit here and there, and they probably would have been fussier, and having to do them faster and make them work and see them all together like that as a group was great experience for me. I was just like thrilled that it happened. I was not thrilled while it was happening. I felt rather pressured, but I was so happy when it finally started coming together, that I really was pleased with them. I didn't want just 7 dolls with bird feet. I really wanted to find other ways to represent their journey and their struggles. So I'm quite pleased with it when it came out in the end, that they came out really cool, I think. I feel like
Nancy, I love the sense of play in them, and also in the urchin one, the best thing was the surprise element with that, because you see from afar the urchin, and then you come up and you're like, oh, there's a little person in there. Love that.
Yeah, that's where I was really struggling with what would be inside the urchin. I tried all kinds of different things, and yeah, that's what happened. I mean, it definitely was all about feeling safe. So being the physical form inside there made sense, a human form. It did end up making sense. I don't always use doll heads in all of my work, but a lot of the work here has them. But they definitely have their own huge amount of history and baggage. Obviously, the doll, from so much fun talking about the Barbie movie all summer, the idea of the baby doll or the grown-up doll, or how little girls play and what they are emulating in their play. And a lot of the dolls I played with, they came with like tools, like if they were a car or to go somewhere, or a bicycle, or different things that they carried. So I'm sure that played into sort of what I was doing here. I definitely played with dolls. I didn't play with Barbies per se, but I had other kinds of dolls when I was young. But the idea of why we choose to represent ourselves in this play form, I think, is really interesting too. The history of dolls goes so far back, and the desire for humans to recreate these little representations of ourselves, I think, is also super interesting, and continues to be in the way they change the different kinds of dolls that have evolved. So there's an awful lot of information there to play with what you want. I know not everyone think they're adorable. Some people think they're really creepy. I have a neighbor who won't come in my house because of them. So it's very interesting to me that way too, that they bring out so many different sort of stories and feelings from the people who do view them. But yeah, in general, I'm mostly, especially when I'm thinking about using a figurative form, I'm thinking about our disadvantages, our handicaps, our struggles, the things that maybe nature offers some animals, but we don't have. Like, I'd love to have wings. I'd love to have, opportunity to have a more textured skin, that I'm not worried about getting skin cancer or whatever it is. There's just like other animals have all these protective qualities and ways to take care of themselves and protect their bodies that humans no longer have, if we did have them at one point. So this sort of physical quality of what we have around us, if it's our clothing, if it's our embedded in our bodies, if it's our hair, but that we're just really weak, and then we need a lot of help. A lot of animals don't, they survive on their own without a lot of help. So I'm always thinking about those kinds of qualities of the textures and the skin and the feet, and wings obviously are just like amazing to me. Wings are the best thing ever.
I think Nancy too, I think that's partially like some of what you're saying to me ties into how you're using wool to sort of express that. Like, you could use other materials, but that is as an animal material. And just, you say that sort of that ancient connection we have with dolls, but even just our connection, how far back does our use of wool, as our second skin go? So I think you using that material in particular really speaks a lot to the work.
That's really nice to think of it as a second skin as well. Yeah. And yeah, it goes back like way deep into Chinese history, the first wool, like slippers, and yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought of like clothing as a second skin, but I love that. A coat or a hat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, about the urchin piece, not knowing when you completed it and what life was like. I think a lot of people either thrived in the studio or didn't go in the studio at all, and I definitely had trouble, getting in there too. But it just brings that piece. It brings so much more meaning, or new meaning, I guess, to it, knowing the context of it. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think I even blocked it out. And all of a sudden came back to me. I tried to block out all those. We had a lot of fun too during that time. So
great. Well, thank you so much. Let's see, next we have Hannah.
Hello. So I this piece is called Fingertips, and it's a kind of a smaller wall hanging piece. And yeah, I use a lot of recycled textiles in my work. I'm interested in works that have floral patterns, both as kind of a connection to nature and the home, and it reminds me a lot of my childhood growing up in the suburbs. And there's something about kind of taking those modest patterns and making them kind of lumpy and strange that I'm really interested in. And this piece also has a ceramic element, so it's kind of this this, I think of it kind of like as a bone, but also as a kind of structure that these softer tendrils are kind of woven through. And I was thinking about both kind of fingers, and as I was making it with my hands and thinking about my fingers, but also about the kind of fingers and tendrils of plants and plant life, and also other kinds of creatures. So I don't know, to me, it just kind of speaks to that connection. And they have these shoelaces dangling from their fingers. And I also like to use humor in my work as kind of as a way to kind of invite the viewer in. And I think there's a little bit of a silliness to some of my things that I hope is kind of disarming, and maybe kind of invites you into the deeper meaning. And I like to kind of use it as a way to investigate both like how lightness and more serious feelings can coexist together. And I think that also connects to a lot of my feelings about nature, because we have you know, a fairly dire situation, but I think there's also this kind of we derive a lot of like peace and joy in nature. And I think trying to like reconcile those things together there's something kind of surreal about that. Yeah, I don't know. You can also go to the next one I can speak about. So this is a piece called Weepy. This is a larger sculpture. It's a freestanding sculpture. It's like closer to the size of a small human or creature. And I'm interested in, when I create freestanding sculptures, how they kind of create a relationship with the viewer and with the other works in the space. Kind of the way that you relate to it is more on this kind of one-to-one level, maybe kind of creating an empathetic relationship. And I think that also applies to the way that I think about our natural environment. And I think my tendency to anthropomorphize it is this urge to kind of like get people to think of these beings, these creatures, or even like things in the home that you don't necessarily consider to have personalities, to kind of like think of them that way. And this piece, I use almost entirely recycled materials, and the fabric that has the white and green kind of stripes on it was this vintage fabric that just, to me, like made me think about like the veins in lettuce kind of. And then I was thinking about veins and how like I don't know, like the language that we use to think about the body is often the same that we use to think about plants and animals, like thinking about limbs and trees and bodies. And this work is called Weepy because that's often a feeling that I have, but it's also a thing that you can, or the language we use to describe certain kinds of trees, like weeping willows, or branches that are weeping and are kind of laden. So I just was interested in that kind of, we have this tendency to like anthropomorphize things with our language and connect them back to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really love the, I mean, there's a lot of work that kind of does what you're saying, like Nancy was saying with the birds, like, you know, bringing a human element to nature or vice versa. But also what you talked about, almost like a contradiction coming together, like things that we, you know, like we rely on nature, but we abuse it, you know, and it's like this relationship, which is the way that it is, and it's been, a certain way or trending a certain way over time. And then at some point, we hope it shifts and does other things. And, but it's just this, I think that contradiction of, throughout life exists in so many different facets, and it's definitely apparent in nature, what we, as humans, try to do to it and all of that. So, but then again, we appreciate it so much that we make work about it like this, and, so, and I love these little pants on this piece too.
Thank you. Yeah, it has these found wooden chair legs. And then yeah, I created little kind of bloomers for it. Yeah, that's definitely like sometimes when I'm making things, I also just like those kinds of silly references or things like that that make you like immediately connect it to like, oh, it has legs, it has feet, it has arms. But you still don't know what it is. I think kind of like trying to defy categorization, but still like leaving you these clues as to what's maybe happening. Yeah, thank you.
Do you plan ahead in any way, or is it kind of like play with shapes and sew and see what happens?
It's a little bit of both, but it's mostly improvisational. I'll usually start with like some sort of idea of where it's going, but then it often changes. And I sew almost entirely by hand, and I think that allows me to kind of like improvise that way. It's such a like additive process, so I can just kind of grab things and add them and change it, because I think that also keeps me engaged while I'm making. I think if I had an idea and then it turned out exactly how I had intended it, I don't know, I might not be as engaged in the process. I like to be surprised a little.
That's fun because I, as a painter, I don't think of this kind of work as being like an intuitive process like I know painting to be, but it totally makes sense that it could be. It's just I don't have those skills or that experience to know that it can be. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think everybody, I'm sure, like, you figure out your own way of working and what materials you feel like you can manipulate to your own will or whatever. And I've kind of just built up this way of working that allows me to do that. And I kind of like that contradiction too, of like, you might not think of textiles as being something that you can kind of improvise so much with, but you can.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks.
And let's see, we have Julia to bring us home here.
Yeah. So my work is, well, I guess in the show it's more two-dimensional, but a lot of my work outside of it includes three-dimensional work, and especially installation. So I kind of consider the 2D stuff to be like flattened versions of the installations, which, like Hannah was saying, I kind of work in a very improvisational sort of way. Like something will happen, a mistake will happen, I'll spill some paint onto the canvas or on the paper, and just kind of roll with it, see what happens. So with this piece, I honestly can't remember where it started. I think I had a monoprint from years before, and this was the ghost image, so you can barely see the original print in there. And then I just sort of, I draw trees a lot, especially when I go outside and draw, just sitting in a park or something. So I think I started with some trees and then made this sort of, I don't know, lake or some kind of terrain around it. Again, it's a little more on the abstract side, but you can sort of, the viewer can imagine whatever they want to into it. Maybe it's a pond, a swamp, I'm not sure. And then the very detailed line work came in at the end, and that definitely took the longest amount of time. I think my best friend has often been the 005 micron pen, for any of those out there who like the micron pen. Yeah, so that took a lot of time, and which I like, sort of doing things that take a little bit longer than you might want them to. It's not efficient, but it's meditative. I think Erika was talking about the meditative process of being in nature as well as the making of work. So when I get into these line after line after line and then switch a direction and then go line after line after line, yeah, it's a very meditative place to be. I don't know if you had the other ones in there as well. Yeah, so this painting is, I think, from 2015. When I was in grad school at Iowa, I had been working right before I moved to Iowa, several jobs in retail. I think Starbucks and Trader Joe's were the main ones. So you'll see kind of imagery from those jobs. I think there's like an onion bag silhouette in there from stocking onions, if any of you have worked in a grocery store before. And cardboard cutouts. I think one of the flower boxes had these, you can see this sort of aqua color with flower shaped cutouts in there. That was a reference to that. So I was sort of referencing the things that had been on my mind, thinking a lot about material waste, just the amount of stuff and packaging that goes in and out of a store, just one single store. So that was a lot on my mind. And then, like I mentioned, the improvisational way of working. I think Penny had asked me at the reception if this is planned out at all, because it's on raw canvas. And so I'm working kind of in a way that's reminiscent of watercolor. So I'm staining the fabric. And it really, I don't really plan these things out at all. I think there was a bunch of blue painter's tape on my wall in my studio at this time. So I painted that with the dark green color, and they just started kind of flying around the canvas. And like I said, I would draw a lot in my sketchbook, in parks, all during the process of sort of thinking while walking, while working, at jobs, in the studio, and then bringing it all together into a piece. Yeah, it's sort of like a back and forth in my head and on the canvas and with other people, and then sort of very circular, if that makes sense. Yeah, and then I think that's all I have to say for now.
Yeah. Oh, it's really interesting. I'm hearing myself. Sorry, I got distracted. It's really interesting to see the way that nature finds its way into the grocery store and then finds its way into your work, and then is in the show called by nature.
Yeah, Julia, I just wanted to say too that I like how you're getting this sort of, like, I remember like when I was living in Washington, D.C. too, and just sort of, gravitating towards little bits of nature within all of this, detritus and, concrete and whatever. But I like that sort of, and how your piece brings that into the whole show too, that there's this sort of nature creeping in within the urban landscape too, and how you there's a balance there, or also just, you sort of gravitate towards, oh, look, there's something growing within all of this, traffic cones or whatever else might be there. And just like that your work brings that, speaks to that.
Yeah, thank you. It's always fun to hear how other people view every piece. So thank you.
I really like, oops, sorry. I was going to just say, I really like it has this feel of a sketchbook. And Allie like kind of has the same direct drawing. I always put elements of drawing in my painting, but mine are much layered up, and you're both are very direct and have such a fresh feel because of that. It's nice.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted there. It's really great to see the variety, and while maybe, some of you do similar things in other work, we're seeing, the certain work you have in this show, but it relates. So it's just a really interesting, kind of back and forth between each of you. So, well, I just want to thank you all for not only being in the exhibition, but also for sharing today during this talk. And I hope that anyone out there watching this, if you're able to, you can come in and see the show through Wednesday, September 13th. And again, we're open 11 to 3 Tuesday, Wednesday, and 11 to 6 Thursday through Saturday. And you can preview and purchase work from the show at mainstreetartscs.org. You can also find links to the Flickr album, so you could see, views of the show, as well as that virtual walkthrough that I did earlier on, just after the show opened. So again, thank you, artists. It's been really great to get to know you, and some of you who I, already know, get to know you more, get to see more of your work, and that's it. So, so thanks so much.
Thank you, Brad. It really was a
Yes.
wonderful experience.
Yes, thank you. And fun
Yeah.
meeting all of you through your work. It's been great.
I agree. Thank you.